Hello and welcome to the 6th episode of the Forrin podcast, the podcast for foreigners of every flavour. 6 episodes, Mike. I can scarcely believe it.
Yeah, 6, 1 before 7, 1 after 5.
That's it. We're nearly there, wherever there is. We're nearly there.
That's the mess of the situation, at least.
So on this podcast, we talk about all issues related to foreignness. And we're going to kick off this week as we normally do. We're going to kick it off, Mike, with a news story, as is our want.
Yeah, and this news story is just about as depressing as you can get, I suppose. I mean,
woo!
Yeah, wow. But you know, one of the reasons we did this is because maybe being foreign, but not for us, but for lots of other people, can be quite difficult. And there was a report from those. From the enemy of last week, if you remember, the Institute of Human Rights. But this is obviously the Danish Institute for Human Rights. That 4 out of 5, which again, quick maths, is 80% of, as it says in the headline, non-Western immigrants. And that word that I mentioned, I think in the first or second episode, efterkommer, which is basically children of immigrants, or second generation immigrants. Say that they experience racism.
Dear me.
And we all have a responsibility to take action, to do something, says Rasmus Brugger from the Institute of Human Rights. And they have a 38-year-old woman called Siham El-Haddad, and she says roughly a couple of times a year she experiences hate speech when she walks on the street. One time she's actually been spat on.
Oh my God.
Another time she's been pushed. And she says, and it says the common denominator for everything is her headscarf.
Yeah.
The article actually starts by saying hedemo valeu du her, which basically a hedemo is a black-headed sort of seagull. I don't know if you've seen the white seagulls with the kind of black faces or the brown faces.
Yeah.
And that's a Danish kind of, what Danish would call hygge-racisme. Hygge is that Danish concept of everything being cozy and nice. And so hygge-racism is just, it's just a joke. It's just a bit of a laugh,
That's it. As is all racism.
As is all racism, yeah. So yeah, and it says that...
Just for those of you, if any of you haven't been listening before, Mike actually lives in Denmark.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. I live here.
Just to make that clear, I live in France, and we kind of do this podcast to talk about endlessly talk about racism in France and Denmark.
Yeah, which is amazing. Yeah, which is That's you're probably right to have cleared that up. So yeah, I live in Denmark, but I live in Odense, which is nowhere near Copenhagen, and Copenhagen is probably, just like every major capital city, the most multi-ethnic area, or has some of the most multi-ethnic areas in Denmark.
Mm.
And so this woman, Siham El-Haddad, she said that just at the end of October, she was walking with her 2 kids, who are 4 and 9 years old, and her husband, in a place called from a place called Østerbro or to Nørrebrogade in Copenhagen, which is pretty much the center and the very multi-ethnic area. And a woman just came up to her about her headscarf and said, "You need to take it off."
Mm.
And then she says she didn't really hear what the woman said, and the woman said, "You have to take off your headscarf. There are too many of you. You are unintelligent," said the woman.
Woo!
And walked on. And but this for me is the most interesting part of it. From a kind of, for those of you who don't know me, I'm a social sciences teacher, which is sociology and politics and economy, and also an English teacher. But yeah, anyway, she says here, she's quoted as saying, "This makes me feel different. We are Danish. I was born and raised in Denmark. So, of course, my family are Danes. But this experience makes me feel outside." And then if you take that quote and then go back to the headline, they're called non-Western immigrants and the Efterkommer, which is second generation. And there has also been a debate in Denmark if third generation immigrants, can they be classified as Danish? And even in my sociology classes, so it's part of like national curriculum that you have to know the difference between an immigrant, that Efterkommer, the second generation, what that actually means, and being Danish. So for example, I'm an immigrant, but my ex-wife is Danish. So that means as my children have one Danish parent, then my kids are classified as Danish. But
they're okay.
They're okay. But obviously, if you came from Turkey or wherever in the 50s and 60s when they first came to work in Denmark, like their grandchildren, those people's grandchildren who are still here, you know, there's still a debate of whether they should be classified as Danish.
Yeah.
And it's rooted, obviously, in these cultural differences, and there has been kind of like segregation and parallel societies that have built up. And Denmark, as most other Western countries, have handled immigration so poorly. So there's these kind of sort of subcultures that have been allowed to sort of exist and not really integrate fully. And there's obviously also been the pushback of obviously racism and stuff, which isn't really encouraging for people to. But yeah, but there are problems. There are sociological problems, societal problems related to these groups. So in order to talk about these problems, then you have to give these groups names. But the name itself then is, you know, it excludes them.
Marks you as different.
Yeah, it marks you as different. And that's a problem, which is why maybe, as we've spoken about again in an earlier podcast, British people call themselves expats because those cultural problems that can result of coming from maybe a more Eastern country, many people who are European don't have that. So in order to sort of separate oneself from these cultural differences coming from the East, you call yourself something different. But as she says here, it says here that that this Rasmus Brugger guy, the chief analyst for the Institute of Human Rights, says that we know there are problems, but the fact that the numbers are so high really kind of takes him aback, and it makes him worried. He says. He also says that we do have to underline that it is people who've experienced racism. So it could also be that people feel that they are either treated unfairly when going for a job, or etc. And it isn't actually anything to do with racism. It could be, but it doesn't really matter. Again, he says 80% is so high. He goes, you just have to take it seriously no matter what.
Yeah, of course.
I
actually read the article in French, and it said racisme perçu, which means perceived racism. So it's
perceived racism.
It's whether or not the person thinks they've been treated differently because of their ethnicity, basically. I mean, have you ever experienced anything like this in Denmark personally, Mike?
No, I can't.
Not on the street kind of thing.
No, not on the street. I've had people again just really want to remind me constantly, sort of when they're maybe a bit drunk, that I'm English and what do you know, Englishman, or something like that. But I can't compare it to people kind of, you know, shouting at me in the street or being spat on. You know,
I've never been spat on, but I've had people call when I've been with my kids in town in Montpellier. I had one guy like walk past us and heard us speak English, and called us English idiots. Literally, wow. I was standing there with my kids. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, like I can speak French pretty well, Mike. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, what? I was so staggered. I didn't say anything to him. Like, and my son was just like, what the hell? You know what I mean? And we both just sort of stood there completely aghast, and he just like walked off. It was just a completely baffling incident. But I know that like in France, I had a friend when I was learning French in Montpellier. She was from Egypt, and she wore a hijab. She doesn't wear it anymore actually because I think she just felt this.
Thanks for
she didn't really need to anymore.
That was really bad. But yeah.
And Yeah, she told me that she'd had people on the bus literally like shout at her face, "Go back to your country." That's in France, you know.
Crazy.
It's just I'm not so. I mean, 4 out of 5. I mean, that's pretty bad, Mr. Denmark.
Yeah.
That's like I think like I said, I did read the article, and the dude from the association says, like, you know, we should all be worried about that, and I kind of agree with him, you know.
Yeah, I kind of agree. But even more, I suppose, alarmingly, if there's 80% of people that feel they've experienced racism, it says here that one of the conclusions of the report is that only 11% actually report it to the police. Mm-hmm. And that's an even bigger problem, because these people who are discriminated, or these people from who, you know, or immigrants, as to say, they obviously don't feel that it, you know, that it's worth it, that anything actually is going to come of it. Yeah. So then you kind of obviously have this. You can maybe draw a conclusion from that they feel that society is kind of against them. And that the authorities and the institutions aren't really for them, because I'm pretty sure if a Danish person was spat on the street or pushed, one of the first things they do is phone the police,
call the cops.
Call the cops, because you'd obviously think that someone's got to do something about that. But if you kind of just shrug your shoulders and pass it off as, well, nothing is going to happen anyway, then that kind of apathy and general mistrust is really what creates these parallel societies, and actually makes things worse rather than makes it better.
I couldn't agree more, Mike.
Thank you. But what she says at the end is that, which is also slightly, you know, also just as depressing as everything else, that many people that she knows, because they're saying that this can affect all different kinds of things in people's lives. And one of the things it can also affect is their choice of education. And she was saying that many have actually chosen an education that she knows based on whether it can be used in other countries if you actually feel the need to move away. And then she says that, think if a white Danish person had the feeling that you don't know if you want to be here tomorrow. That is a thought that many of us have, even though we're born in Denmark, she says.
Yeah,
and that's really quite depressing, isn't it?
Yeah,
really.
That's really sad.
Yeah. And but, you know, it's a difficult thing to sort of go around then saying Denmark is a racist country, because, you know, as I said, you know, I don't know any, and I haven't seen it. And I've heard, people maybe make jokes and stuff, but I've heard people make jokes in England. But I've never actually seen someone be, like, actually racist towards someone else. I've overheard people's conversations maybe, and I've just sort of shaken my head and thought, oh my God, sort of thing. But I've never actually seen it. And it does raise the question, if I actually saw it, like, would I do anything about it?
I've got to be honest, I've never, apart from the incident that I sort of mentioned before, I've never seen any sort of anti-Islamic racism. I've never seen that. I've never actually seen it, you know, apart from I've seen slogans on walls, and exactly, like, you know, sort of politicians talking or whatever, but actually on the street, I've never seen, you know, hijabi spat on or anything like that. I've never seen that. No. You know what I mean? And to be honest, if I did see that, I would do something about that. Do you know what I mean? Like, even if it was just filming it to give to the cops or whatever, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I really hope I would, because that's what this Rasmus Borger from the Institute of Human Rights says, that more and more of us, employers, but also the general society, has to actually sort of do something and say something if they see it. And
I mean, there's so much we can talk about, you know, in relation to this. I mean, you know, I could say, for example, you know, for those who haven't been listening, I'm a master's student. I'm studying fiction at the University of Nîmes in the south of France, and I would say, you know, for example, like, you know, no one. I've never seen anything like this in my class, but then, you know, no one in my class is a Muslim. Yeah, you know what I mean? It's just like, you know, literally everyone, you know, apart from literally one person, everyone is white. Do you know what I mean? It's, you know, there are so many issues that you could, you know, you really have to question that. like, I do question that, you know, because it's just, you know, as we talked about like last week, you know, France has a relatively very high level of Muslim people in the population. I mean, it's high. It's like, you know, it's 10% or whatever, or 9% or something like that. But you know, it would appear that, you know, for certain, you know, domains such as the arts or whatever, but you know, I don't see many Muslim people doing that kind of thing. Put it that way. So I mean, there's obviously.
No. And I've got one colleague, I think, or maybe two colleagues who are Muslim.
Yeah.
Out of I think about 100, 110 like academics, and academics are masters. You know, we all have master's degrees.
That's
and
insane.
I think only two of them employed at my school. I'm not saying, you know, but employed at my school, or maybe are from what I know of have
non-Western origins.
Non-Western origins, and.
But it's just like at the university, like I was saying, like in the south of France, there is a lot of like of immigration from North Africa. You get a lot of Maghrebi people that come here, people from mainly from Algeria and Morocco. But I see a lot of Muslim students at school, for example, at the university. But there's just that there's none in doing what I'm doing. But like regardless, it's a bit off topic. I was just saying. I'm really glad you highlighted this because, like, it's. I think it's very easy if you're white and living in a Western country to not be aware of the kind of racism that people can face, especially if they are visually marked, if you like, by the clothes they wear, by the color of their skin. You know, it's real racism, and it's no, you know, when it's as prevalent as that, I mean, then it really is no joke. So I'm really glad that you talked about this.
And one of the things I hear in people's, I don't know, it's difficult because obviously no one, you know, there's a guy called Ibrahim Kendi who wrote How to Be an Anti-Racist, and he spoke about the term racist itself is something that kind of needs to be desensitized. He was saying that we are all racist. He is also racist, but there's being, you know, but there's the act of being racist rather than being a racist. There's the verb instead of the noun, and we can all be racist. And there's nothing wrong. Well, obviously there's nothing wrong with being racist, but the idea is that if you are being racist, is then listening to why you're being racist and trying to do something about it. But because people hear the term, oh, that's racist, then their automatic reaction is they want to defend that they're not. And he's saying, no one's saying you are a racist, but what you said was racist, and there is a difference to that. And a lot of people say, and I've also heard it myself, that he really brings up the interesting argument about when people say they don't see color. So for them, they don't see the difference. But they, you know, for them, we're just one holistic whole and we're all human beings, man. But he said that is actually a problem because it's not good enough being a non-racist. You have to be an anti-racist.
Correct.
And so if you don't see color, then you won't actually see if people are being discriminated against because of their color. And in order to be a kind of an ally or to be an anti-racist, you need to be able to basically say without feeling racist that this person across from me is a black man or a black woman. And there's nothing wrong with recognizing that. Because if you don't recognize it, then someone else could be being discriminatory towards them, or an institution could be at your workplace, and you won't notice it because you won't see the difference.
Well, I mean, if to follow on from that, if you're going to be anti-racist, then that means that you're going to act against racism. So, like when you say, you know, you hope that you would act if you saw something like that, you know, I'm pretty sure you would. You know, I would. Definitely. And like, you know, you're right.
I hope
like, you know, basically you would, of course you would. If you saw someone spitting on somebody because they were wearing a hijab, you would do something. I believe in you, Mike. Do you know what I mean?
I would hopefully go and see if that person who'd been spat on was okay.
Yeah, well, of course.
Yeah, that's basically, but and I think,
like I said, as soon as you get your phone out, it's over for whoever's doing that, because it's they will know that, because as soon as somebody gets hold of that, they're going to be in trouble. You know, you can't do that, and you know, you don't have to be violent to be anti-racist. You know, you can simply stop people. You can stop people pretty easily because, like, you know, there are laws against that sort of thing, you know.
Yeah.
So there
you know, that was my news of the week. There you go. That was it. You know, that's an uplifting story for everybody.
Woo.
But but I think, as you said to me one time, and I'm sorry for any Danish people listening, but you said white, rich, sort of northern country is a little bit racist. Wow, what a surprise. I remember you said that a few years ago.
Yeah.
And you know,
it shows how, you know, how true that is. Basically, that's what we always end up talking about, because like it's always in the news. Is effectively the far right attitudes towards non-Western origin people. So it's it's when we talk about sort of foreignness. A lot of the time we do revert to this because it's effectively it's the sort of racism which is most reported on when we talk about news. So so there you go.
I think where I went on one about Dave and Richie.
Oh yeah, that was good. Yeah. But you see, like our podcast, Mike, is a reflection of the societies in which we live. You know.
Oh,
it's reflexive.
That sounds amazing.
It's specular.
It's meta, Pat. Meta.
Fucking meta.
Yeah, that's it. So
there you go.
So yeah.
No, there you go. Well, that was the news of the week.
Yeah.
My mum, Mike, has recorded a news of the week jingle.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
Have you heard it?
Yeah, I have heard it, but
can you not edit it in, like in this conversation?
I might
just edit it in so we can all hear
it. If you hear this jingle at this point, this is my mum.
Okay, great.
News of the week. News of the week.
Yeah, your mum's been rather complimentary. She
my mum, she loves what we're doing, Mike. We're changing the world. That's it. Her name's Aid. Hi, Aid.
Hi, Aid. And
you lift us up every week, Aid.
And a colleague of mine called Stacey, English guy. He says that I've forgotten. He told me the word. He said he'd send me the word, so it's his fault, but he didn't. He said that my voice is very kind of I don't know, almost like audio. It's like a good kind of level. It's very listenable.
I like that.
It's very audio. It's almost like being kind of picturesque, but in sort of audio-ness.
Oh my God.
If that kind of makes any, he found the word and he told me to send it to me and he didn't. But thanks for that, Stacey. That was very nice of you to hear. I won't tell you what he said about your voice, Pat. But no. Oh yes. But I think But there you go. That's just a couple of bits of feedback. But yeah, I can't wait to hear the jingle. Can't wait.
Okay. Anyway, that was the news. So we're gonna rattle on for another 10 minutes about going to school. Is that what we're going to talk about?
That is what we've agreed to talk about.
Okay, let's do it. So we're going to talk a bit more about going to school. Have you got something you specifically want to talk about, Mike?
Well, I actually want to ask you because it seems something that I've kind of maybe haven't thought about too much, but you're actually studying in French, right?
Yep, that's it. Yeah.
And so you're writing in French and your lessons are in French
and
everything's in French. You see, because, well, when I did social sciences, that was in Danish. But I actually got kind of dispensation so that I could write most of my papers in English, or all of them, in fact. And I would just use like the Danish textbook. So if I was doing quotes or everything, that would be in Danish. But everything I was writing was in English.
So I say it's all in French, but it's actually not. I'm doing a creative master's, and quite a few of the seminar are in English, actually. So we're doing one today. We did one for like 3 hours, which was about drag. That was all in English. The researcher that did that, he spoke in English. He's actually French, but it's kind of a bilingual course. But all of my papers are written in French. Yeah, almost. Well, I'm trying to think. Yeah, all of them are. I don't think I've written anything in English. Actually.
Isn't it like really hard?
It's all been written in French.
Because for me, learning the language was
I'm amazing, Mike. That's
obviously,
the thing,
because for me, learning language is my written Danish is still far behind. Well, not far. Yeah, well, I suppose. Yeah, I can't really be the judge. I feel that it's far behind my spoken Danish. writing Danish with all the kind of different grammar rules and comma rules and stuff. Obviously, I can write legibly, and I can write I can write formal Danish, and I can write to my students, I can write to my colleagues, etc. But it's still not, you can still see if you read it as a native speaker that someone who isn't Danish has written this. Do you see what I mean?
When I did my every year in the masters, we have to at the end of each year we have to hand in what's called a memoir. So like normally for a master's you have to just hand in one long piece of work at the end. I don't know. I think that's what it is in England as well. I don't know if it's the same in Denmark. But you basically at the end of each year, like I have to sort of hand in my memoir is in recherche création. So like I do a creative work, and I do a piece of research, a research document that goes alongside it to accompany it. And I think the novel I wrote was like 200 pages long, and the research document was about 30 pages long, something like that. I don't know. I don't know how many words of that, and it was all in French. Yeah.
I mean, that's just like that is.
But I had to get it checked. Obviously, like I had to pay for somebody to read that, because it was. You're right. I mean, for me to write natively is pretty hard. I mean, I probably take about twice as long to write something in French, because I have to. I mean, obviously there are a lot of tools that you can use now, that to sort of like check grammar and stuff. I actually don't need it quite as much anymore. I say twice as long. I'm probably doing myself a bit of a disservice, to be honest. I'm pretty bilingual.
You're actually faster.
I'm a lot.
Than normal people.
I'm a lot better than I used to be. Put it that way. I mean, but I've done a lot of writing in French. But you're right, it is hard. But then my degree was in literature and in sort of media jobs within literature. So I sort of did literature and media training on the side as well, and it was all in French. There was none of that was in English at all. So I did I'm a pretty big reader, so I did a huge amount of reading in French. And the degree level, the teachers are a lot more forgiving of grammatical sort of errors, because the
it's more what you're saying rather than how you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. The general concern. I mean, to be honest, a lot of French people, they make a lot of mistakes in writing. French is difficult. It's not, especially if you're Anglophone. I mean, French is a very tough language to learn grammatically. It's.
Well, I mean, Pat, if you could do it, then it can't.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
It's but like, even a lot of French people, you see, there are a lot of words that sound exactly the same but are written differently depending on the grammatical context.
Right.
So there are two C. There are three, in fact, four. Don't know. There's C-E-S, S-E-S, C''E-S-T, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, okay.
So, like famously, ça is one that people always get wrong. Essaye, ça, it means his, or like it's a possessive pronoun, it's a possessive pronoun.
Yeah, his, hers, etc. Yeah.
His, hers, etc., etc. And ça.
I just wanted to show that I knew what a possessive pronoun was. Yeah.
And the other "sa" is a C with a little squiggle at the bottom. It's called.
All right.
I can't remember what that's called. Hilariously, it's called a sibyl or something. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which is CA, which means that. And famously, I mean, you see it in like chat all the time. People just get it wrong. So teachers kind of expect it. And to be honest, like a lot of teachers are extremely complimentary of my level of French. I think I was told quite regularly, certainly in the early days, there were teachers who were just like, you seriously, you're going to find this really hard, to actually sort of like do a literature degree as a foreigner in a foreign language.
Yeah. I mean,
it's going to be tough, but I did it because I'm awesome.
Yeah, if we just edit that bit out. But yeah, I mean, it did sort of strike me because, as I said, I studied English, so that's a bit of a cop-out. So with the books I read in English, I wrote English. But did you not do any of your reading in Danish at all? Did you not read any Danish books or anything? Not literature, no. But when I read social sciences, politics, sociology, economy, that was all of it. Some of it was in Norwegian, but it's pretty much the same. And there was maybe a couple of English texts and stuff, but most of that was either in Danish.
So did you, I mean, when you read Danish now, like just to sort of get away from school a bit, say you read a newspaper or whatever, are you ever stuck for vocabulary or anything like that? Is there is there any word that you don't?
I have to look words up sometimes, or there's sort of idioms that I think, okay, I'm not really familiar with that. And even today, not today as in today, but the last few months, I'll hear people say things, idioms, and I'll be able to work out what they mean by it. But I would have never heard it before, and I've been here like 24 years. I go, oh, that's a new one. That's a new one. And but you can sort of work out what they mean in context. But as I said, just I suppose reading a lot of French and having to write a lot of French, you're just going to get good at it.
I think I was a lot more vigilant than a lot of the other students. I remember you saying when we talked about school before that you were pretty vocal in your classes, and it sounded to me like you were quite passionate, put a lot of effort in, and
maybe
that is one of the keys of being a foreigner in school. Like, I don't want to generalize, but like sometimes they can really push you because there's kind of no plan B. You kind of like, if someone said to me exactly. In fact, it was the Egyptian lady I used to know. Like she said to me once, she was just like, si on est étranger, on n'a pas le droit d'échouer. It means if you're a foreigner, you don't have the right to fail. I mean, like at the time I was like European, this was like pre-Brexit, but if she failed, you see, she was out, because she wouldn't be able to get another student visa. They're
okay, in that sense, yeah.
They're renewed every year, so she had to pass. And like, I mean, for example, I mean, we did core on, I said core is a French for lesson.
Yeah.
We did core on things like Dostoevsky. So I read Crime and Punishment in French.
Wow.
That's
probably my favourite book ever. But that's in English.
I really love that book. I read it. It's amazing. I read it in English and French, and there were students that obviously that just didn't read it, and it was just like, well, it's I
Wikipedia,
think,
mate.
Yeah,
let's wiki it.
I put in a lot of effort to make sure that I could understand French, and doing things like that, which like reading massive books in French is how I did it.
Size is important,
Size is important, Mike.
War and Peace in French.
But, I've never read War and Peace in French, man.
But my final question to you is, I suppose, because I mentioned it when we spoke about school last time, is like today, for example, where you said that you had a course, or recently there was a lecture given in English. Do you feel any kind of the pressure on yourself, or maybe not pressure's the wrong word, an expectation that perhaps everyone kind of looks to you, okay, well, he is now going to understand this better than all of us because he's English? Or maybe that you feel that you should understand it more than everybody else because you're English.
I could definitely relate to what you were saying. I've been in the first year of my masters. You see, like we have to do these text reading seminars. So we get given these texts in English, and then we sort of get split up into groups, and then the groups have to do a presentation about that text in English, like explaining the text, basically, sort of breaking it down into various bits and explaining it in English. So we take it in turns as a group. And I think, there were definitely times when I spoke too much. Do you know what I mean? Because I was effectively just like showing off, because, some of the texts were really difficult. Like we did have some tough ones last year. We do. And obviously the level of English of the other students is kind of, there's I can speak English and there's I can speak English. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And obviously their levels, risen massively over the 2 years. And I definitely did learn that, there were probably times where I should just shut up. You know what I mean?
That's what I kind of learned, or didn't learn, but that's what I learned on reflection. That's sort of what I learned on reflection, that maybe less is more.
But then, this year, we had the same seminars, and obviously with different texts. And to be honest, I kind of feel that sometimes I have a role to speak, because sometimes the texts are really difficult. I mean, you've heard of a guy called Stuart Hall, right? Social sciences.
Yeah. I'll say it doesn't sound clever.
He did because we do like media stuff. Like,
yeah.
He
It's due to
his texts are fucking hard. Like, you know, I'm not a massive fan of social science just because it's so hard sometimes. I'm just like, oh my God, like it's
easy, mate.
You know, it's sometimes it can be pretty complicated shit. And,
it can, yeah. And at that level, it is really complicated. I struggle at that level, on that level.
Master's level. And obviously, and it's in English as well. So they're doing it in like a foreign language. And I know what that feels like. Sometimes you're just like, I do not understand this. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, I don't, you know, I can look up all the words you like. You know what I mean? I don't get it. And sometimes like I can see that happening, and I sort of stick my hand up and I'll kind of explain it. And, you know, it's, and I can do that for them. And, you know, I feel like I'm helping rather than kind of overriding them now, if you see what I mean. Yeah. So I've learned that, you know, that's good because I know.
Well, that's what I suppose I tried to do, but I think I just tried to do it too much.
Yeah, there is a fine line, I think.
Yeah.
But there we go.
Yeah. That kind of wraps up the whole education. So, you know, we can do a part 3 if there's backed by popular demand. If people want to hear more about it.
More about me being in school.
Yeah, more about me being in school. Well, I think a lot of people, especially foreign students, or maybe just students in general who have been around a foreigner, you know, should be able to relate to, because as you said yourself, there's a lot of French students, and there would have, you know, the whole class would be full of Danish students, and with a Danish teacher talking English to them, and talking about English literature. So I think this could, you know, I think a lot of people should be able to, in some way, relate to it.
I think so.
But apart from people. Apart from a few emails saying that if we just pay about 3,000 euros into an account, that it'll unlock some kind of massive amount and we'll get 75 million. We haven't really had any emails, Pat.
This is shocking. I would say that basically anybody who has listened to this point, send us an email. What's the email address, Mike?
It's theforrinpodcast @gmail.com. I mean,
and what's our Instagram account?
It's @Forrin podcast. There you go.
Well, like there we are. We're just sitting there waiting for your messages, listener.
Yeah, so and I think listener is more sort of it's more accurate. But if the one listener would send us an email, but again, obviously, if you have anything to say, any comments, any ideas, anything you want to hear about, then obviously let us know. Otherwise, we'll just continue doing exactly what we want, how we want, and when we want to do it.
That's it.
Yeah. You will not be able to get rid of us. That's the overriding message from this episode. We're going nowhere, Pat.
That's it. I like that, Mike. There's never been a truer thing to say. Okay, right, well, many thanks for listening, all of you who are still here. Mum, send me an email, and we'll see you again in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, see ya. Bye.
Bye.